The month that was June 1990. June opened with a historic handshake. On the 1st, President George H.W. Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev signed an agreement to stop making chemical weapons and begin destroying the stockpiles. For families who'd lived through Cold War drills and nuclear fear, it felt like the world was finally stepping back from the brink. But just days later, the Gulf of Mexico was on fire. On June 8th, the tanker Megaborg exploded off the coast of Texas, spilling millions of gallons of crude oil into the sea. Coastlines were blackened, thousands of birds and marine animals were covered in oil, and fishing communities saw their livelihoods vanish overnight. The cleanup lasted months, cost tens of millions of dollars, and left scars on local ecosystems that were still studied years later. That same week, the U.S. Midwest was torn apart by one of the worst tornado outbreaks in memory. 88 twisters ripped across Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Whole neighborhoods were flattened. Families who survived still recall the sound of freight trains in the sky, and for many it became the defining story of their childhood. Over in Europe, June brought scenes no one thought they'd live to see. On the 22nd, Berlin's Checkpoint Charlie, for decades the stark face of the Cold War, was dismantled in front of crowds who cheered and took pieces home as souvenirs. And just a day later, the last Soviet troops left Germany, closing an occupation that had lasted since World War II. Not everything was turmoil. On June 7th, Universal Studios opened its Orlando park, reshaping family holidays in Florida. And on June 8th, the world's eyes turned to Italy as the FIFA World Cup began, filling televisions with flags, anthems, and the promise of a summer of football. But Eastern Europe still struggled with its new freedom. Between June 13th and 15th, Bucharest was shaken by the Mineriad, when thousands of miners were sent into the city to violently crush anti-government protests. Hundreds were injured, and Romanians saw clearly that their revolution was far from over. June 1990 wasn't just headlines. It was a month where some people felt history bending towards peace, while others lived through disasters and violence that left permanent marks on their lives.